When did you first arrive in Venice, and what was your first impression of Venice Beach?
Well, I think I got out there sometime in the mid-'70s, early '70s, and it was always a laid-back, nice, different kind of hippie, early Greenwich Village, but with West Coast style. I didn't really understand the Venice thing until I went back and did the Doors movie in 1990. I really got into more of the Venice thought because Jim Morrison had lived there and really haunted the place. We went to all the places he'd been, including some of the rooftops. It was a poetic place, and the music we put over the scenes in Venice, I thought reflected the early work, because I think Jim was motivated by Venice in the early days after UCLA. That's sort of where he started in LA. Venice was kind of a heart, and that's where he met Pam, I think.
Shoes now they croon beneath the moon beside an ancient lake. Enter again the sweet forest.
The Doors was just my homage to what it meant to me as a young man to hear that music for the first time. It was striking, it was original, it was unlike, I love the 60s music and it stays with me. And the Temptations and Motown, but the Beatles too, but it wasn't the same thing. When you heard Morrison, for me, it was just it was more white psychedelia. But it was very clear, though. He was the thing about Morrison, and I like the other groups a lot, but Morrison had a vision, and you could see it in his lyrics and his poems. He was more of a poet, really.
Let's swim to the moon, let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps too high.
He captivated me as a young man. You see, I grew up with classical music, playing piano, never really knew much about Elvis Presley and all that, and so Morrison was an introduction. And I wanted to capture that on film, just give that young man that first love of something in your life.
On a moonlight drive.
And I tried to bring back the era, that whole period of kind of an innocence about it. There was people giving away free love and talking about peace, and it was, I thought, a wonderful moment. You know, I never lived here during that period, that's true, but I did have a lot of people on the set who talked to me about it and gave me an impression of it. We took over Venice at that period in terms of, we rented out all the stores, we tried to remake it as much as we could in the style. I deeply admired Jim Morrison, and I loved him in a way that a filmmaker loves a subject. And I probably, if anything, I erred too much in loving him, I think, but I did make him into a modern hero to me. Some people would criticize me and say I made him into a horrible person, but I didn't see it that way. I see him as a very creative person. And I think one of the misunderstood things about the film, even today, is if you really look deeper, he gets better. He may physically become more decadent in many ways. You may call it that. He does become more Ernest Hemingway-like. But the work at the end is impeccable. The music, the lyrics, the precision of it, I don't see it as a rise and fall of a rock star. I see it as the development of an artist who did have a strong connection with the death impulse, the thanatos, and he lived his life on the edge and brought him, he fulfilled something, a destiny in himself. So I don't see it as a failure at all. That's sort of the conventional approach. I see him as a visionary and a breakthrough. He paid the price of what he believed. That's the way I see him. He went too far, yeah. The excess was his undoing, but when you talk to Paul Rothchild and as many of the people who knew him, you get a sense that that was what made him special. We've been criticized by many people who know him for having made him so excessive, but I don't agree. I think we caught something very essential to his nature, and enough people who knew him well have told me that. And by the way, I just want to add, the film was extremely complicated to research and to write. We operated off of actually a series of fragmentary witnesses. In other words, there was 120 some accounts that we read that were written by Jerry Hopkins. He interviewed 120 people. They were never in any single book, but those 120 people knew him at various points of his life. So we absorbed that, and we tried to put that in the movie, and some of it is obviously contradictory. For example, you know, Jim had tremendous love of women, but if you read these fragments, there were 60 different women in his life, and you cannot possibly, or even do 10 or 5 women. It's very difficult. So we ended up condensing a number of women into 2 characters, essentially. That's always difficult and open to criticism because you have to take liberties and license. The chief producer, Bill Graham, moderated the war between families. We had real fights from the Morrison side and from the Patricia side. So we had to, Bill Graham made that possible, but you can't believe the amount of details that we had to go, and also restrictions. We couldn't show certain things. But what's interesting about Jim is he's a voyager. He doesn't settle with one. He doesn't really, he moves on. He's totally a solitary voyager or a solitary realizer in this world. One advice I could give to a young filmmaker, which is difficult because when I started it was more of a rara avis. It was not known to go into film. You just kind of like, it was a new world. And now, you know, 40 years later, it's been over-discovered in a sense because the technology has so flattened out it's so difficult. It was so difficult in the 60s to actually make a film. Celluloid, lighting, equipment, cost, and difficulty, degree of difficulty. Now, I mean, anybody can pretty much make a video film with a little bit of application. So it's a whole different, it's obviously much more volume and much more competition. You could argue that more people emerge, and singular visions may emerge, but it's very hard for people to know what to watch when there's such a volume of material. So as a young man, it's a difficult thing. I mean, I do think, or a woman, you have to have a madness, I think, a certain vision to, that you can do nothing other, that you must do this, and you must, and who knows, it sometimes comes from without and sometimes from within, or a combination. You are given this feeling, this passion, this destiny, and you have to do it. Like Jim Morrison wrote his music. He didn't know he was going to be a rock star. He wrote the lyrics according to what he felt. He thought they might be a book. He thought that, he didn't know what. It became music, much to his surprise. I would say the same thing is true about film. You gotta, if you go about it as an industry, I suppose you could also do well, but it's not my style. I think if you go about it with passion, real passion and singularity, and keep to an original vision, you may stand out.
On behalf of the other Venice Film Festival and the community of Venice, we'd like to honor Oliver Stone with our most prestigious award that embodies the spirit of Venice and filmmaking, to Mr. Stone.
Well, thank you, Ruby. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And it's an honor to be recognized by a city in the canals that I have known for a long time and appreciate it. And so it was a home for the Doors, I guess. The origin of the Doors. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Try to set the night on fire.